Y'all are dying to know what this is, aren't you? You're just going to have to wait. We've got visuals tonight. We're going to have so much fun. Okay, let's talk about 1999. 1999. Where were you? Think back to that year. I had moved down here, had only been here a couple months. I was working at Cool River Cafe. If any of you have ever been there, Las Colinas, yes. Getting ready to literally party like it was 1999. I was so excited for that year because finally the song would really resonate, you know? But 1999 was a really big year for movie lovers. 1999 was the year that George Lucas came back from a 16-year Star Wars hiatus and brought us the atrocity that was Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Does anybody remember Jar Jar Binks? Oh my gosh, why? That movie never should have happened. It was also the year that we learned that Haley Joel Osment could see dead people. It was the year that this guy said, "Get in my belly." Remember him? It was the year that Andy went off to summer camp and that Woody made peace with the fact that his best friend would have to someday grow up. And it was the year that Neo, played by one Keanu Reeves, discovered that there was more to life than what you can see. So The Matrix, I loved those movies. I mean, I don't know about you, but my husband and I, we were all in, and we were talking about this the other day, and he's got the DVDs. We have no way to play them, but we do have the DVDs. It's a 4-film franchise that globally has grossed about $1.8 billion. And according to Wikipedia, it takes place in a dystopian future where intelligent machines have taken over and they have distracted humanity by plugging them into the Matrix so that they could use humanity as an energy source, all right? That's the gist. Perhaps you remember this famous scene. Morpheus, played by Lawrence Fishburne, offers Neo a choice. You remember this? That's right, a choice of 2 pills. If he takes the blue pill, he'll wake up the next day, have no memory of the events of the day prior, and he will go on with his life exactly as it was, believing, as Morpheus says, whatever he wants. But if he takes the red pill, he will see reality as it truly is, and the truth will set him free. That's the premise of the movie. And I think one of the reasons that these movies have been so popular is that they strike a chord within us. I wonder if you, like me, have ever felt a little bit like you're plugged into the Matrix and something's off and you don't know what. You've got this longing for something and nothing seems to satisfy it for more than a short period of time. What if there's more to see than what we actually see? In your homework last week, and Janae did such a good job last week. I'm so grateful. She's here tonight. I'm so grateful. Yes, please. I'm so grateful that she was willing to step in like that. But in your homework last week, it opened with the author talking about a scene from 2 Kings chapter 6. And this has always been one of my favorite scenes in the Old Testament. So you have the king of Syria. And he decides he's going to go to war against Israel. But the problem is that somehow or other, the Israelites keep thwarting him. Like he'll make plans to attack them, and then the Israelites will go a different way. And so he sends for his servants, and he wants to know why the Israelites keep thwarting him. And the servants tell him there is a man, a prophet of God, it's Elisha, who hears from the Lord, and he knows what the king of Syria says in private. And so he is able to assist the king of Israel and help them escape the Syrians. And so then the king says this in 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 13, "Go and see where he is, Elisha, that I may send and seize him." It was told him, "Behold, he is in Dothan." So he sent their horses and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God, Elisha's servant, rose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was circled all around the city. And the servant said, "Alas, my master, what shall we do?" Elisha said, "Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And then Elisha prayed and said, "Oh Lord, please open his eyes that he may see." And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Elisha knew that there was more to see than what his servant could see. The Matrix is based on the premise that humanity is trapped inside a false reality and lulled into believing that all there is to see is what you see. So Morpheus's job was to wake Nero up. It was to show him the truth, to give him this true reality so that the truth could set him free. And so together they could save mankind. And I think John is doing the same thing. Now, last week, Janae taught through chapter 4, like the best chapter in the whole book, such a good chapter. And because the chapter division between chapter 4 and chapter 5 is really kind of wonky, I'm going to go back and just kind of skip a rock over the chapter and touch on some of the high points. Because if I were to just start in chapter 5, it's almost like we're starting in the middle of a sentence, but we are certainly starting in the middle of John's train of thought. So the end of chapter 4 really should have been chapter 5, verse 5. So I'm just going to go back and touch on a few things. John is essentially telling us that our world is a little bit like the Matrix. Okay, chapter 4 verse 1 talks about this true and greater reality that you and I are a part of, but that we can't necessarily see. Verse 1 says, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world." Okay, so let's practice some basic observation. What can we pull from that sentence to learn about this this true reality? First of all, we see that there are spirits, plural. These spirits want us to believe them. They have something they're trying to persuade us into. Some of these spirits are from or sent by or sourced from God, but not all of them. The spirits that are not from God are empowering false prophets to deceive people, both believers and unbelievers. And so just like in the Matrix, there is more to see than what you and I can see. You and I live a physical life in a physical world that overlaps with a spiritual realm that's just as real as the physical world. So this physical world that we can see overlaps with the spiritual realm that we cannot see. But we know just from life on a daily basis, just by scrolling through your Apple News feed, we know that there is evil at work in the world, right? Well, John wants us to be wise to that. He tells us to test these spirits. Okay, this made a lot of sense in the days of the early church when there was more spiritual activity. There were more miracles because this is how people were coming to believe. But there is still an element of that in our world today because we just as much are living a physical existence that is overlapped with a spiritual realm. So how do we test the spirits and what does that mean? I think a better way to put that for us is test the message, test the messenger. Here's a good example. My son shocked me the other day by asking me some questions that come straight out of the book of Revelation. Well, I know that Nick has read the book of Jonah because I made him do that one time when he was in trouble. But other than that, I don't think he spent a whole lot of time in his Bible, certainly not in the book of Revelation. So I asked him where he got this, and he's following this TikToker. And so I went and looked up this TikToker, and most of what he says is pretty good, but there is some prosperity in there. There's some real name it and claim it in there. How do I know that? How do I know that's not right? Because I know what this book says. Now, John, who is fighting against Gnosticism, and you remember that they believe that Jesus was not fully human, he says this is how we test the spirits. We know a spirit is from God by whether or not it says that Jesus is the Son of God born in the flesh. And then John brings up the spirit of the big A Antichrist, which is the power behind all of the little a Antichrists running around. But the believers are from God. The little a Antichrists are from the world. You are from God. And if you are from God, that means you are empowered by God. And that means that you have already overcome all of the little a Antichrists. And we're going to talk about that a lot in this lesson today, but suffice it to say, we know that we have already overcome the little a Antichrist because Jesus, through his death and resurrection, has already overcome the big A Antichrist that overpowers the little a Antichrists. Elisha was not afraid of the Syrian army. Why? Because he saw the true and greater reality. And what did he say to his servant? He said, do not be afraid because those who are with them are more than those who are with us. And I think this was echoing through John's mind because he tells us that he who is with us, he who is in us, is greater than he who is in the world. Who's in the world? Big A Antichrist and all the little a Antichrists running around. And then in verses 7 through 21, this might be my favorite passage in the entire Bible, certainly in this letter. But John gives us the greatest teaching in all of Scripture on the love of God. Love is not something God has. Love is not something God does. Love is something that God is. God is made of love. When you get all the way down to his molecular essence, God is made of love because God is love. And that means that everything God does, he does from love for love. Everything. And it's important for us to know that and hold on to that because there are a lot of things in the Bible that don't make a whole lot of sense. And so what I always have to come back to is while this may seem strange and foreign to me, what I can know that I know is that God is love. There is nothing unloving in him because he is made of love. And so everything he does comes from love and is for love. Verse 16 says, we have come to know and believe God's love for us. We've come to know and believe God's love for us. What does it look like to know and believe the love that God has for us? It looks like love in action. Because what is love when we're talking about biblical love, the love that God has for us? It's not a lump of something that you give someone. It is an action that you do toward someone. A counselor once said that love with no object is grief. I love that. Love without a place to land is grief. Anyone who's lost someone they love dearly knows just how true that statement is. And when our hearts are full of love and that love has no place to go, what do? We despair. We're lonely. And that's because love is not something that we're given so that it can sit and ferment, so that it can sit and grow moss. You don't hold on to love. What do? You receive love and you immediately give it away. Someone you love dearly tells you they love you. What do? I love you too. Someone does an act of kindness towards you, an act of kindness for you. What do? You say thank you. You show a token of appreciation back. A lot of times it motivates us to show an act of kindness towards someone else, but love is always regenerating itself. It cannot sit stagnant. And we can't actually love God back, can we? I mean, he is not here standing next to me in a physical body so that I can touch him and hug him and say, I love you so much. I wish he was. We can tell him we love him, but that's just words. Love is actually an action. And so how do we love God back? By loving others. And that brings us to chapter 5. 1 John 5, 1 through 2 says this: everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God. And everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commands. So this is a circular force here. We love because God first loved us. And in order to show God that we love him, we have to have that love land on someone else. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commands. But let's go back just a tick. What does it mean to be born of God? If you were raised in evangelical tradition, you hear this all the time: born again Christian, born again Christian. I was raised in the Episcopal Church, and we did not talk about being born again. That was something I did not hear a whole lot of until I moved to Texas. So what is rebirth? It's also called regeneration. It is what happens when God quickens your heart and you respond in faith. This concept is first introduced to us in John's gospel. Jesus tells a Pharisee named Nicodemus that in order to see the kingdom of God, one must be born again. And John says in his letter, everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God. And this has led to a lot of theological arguments. I don't think we need to unravel these threads tonight, but which came first, the faith or the rebirth? There's good arguments on both sides. I tend to land that God has to quicken our heart before we can respond in faith. It's interesting. They obviously use rebirth as an analogy. Jesus used an analogy. How much did you have to do with your physical birth? Like, how much thought did you put into that? How much effort did you put into that? None. That was a random act. That was a random, I'm not going to go into the biology of it, but you had no part in the decision-making process, right? I believe that in the same way God created man and woman from nothing in the very beginning, I believe that he creates our new life out of nothing. And so we are reborn into faith. But we're reborn into something else too, because we're not just born into the world. When you're born into a family. And likewise, we are also born into a family. We're born into the family of God. We're adopted into God's family. And the mark of this family is love. Maybe you know the old hymn, "They shall know we are Christians by our love." That is the badge of Christianity. That while the rest of the world responds in frustration and agitation and anger and showing someone a not very nice form of a wave, what do? We respond in love. We respond in love because that is the mark of a Christian. It's how the rest of the world should know who we are. By love. This says, everyone who loves the Father loves those who are born of the Father, or who also belong to the Father. So tell me if your kids had these. In my family, we call them loveys. Both of my kids had a lovey. A lovey is that thing where if you go on vacation and your kid forgets the lovey, you have to call a friend and have them overnight the lovey to you because child won't stop screaming. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, so my son had a stuffed blue bunny rabbit, and my son is so creative with names. I just love all the names that he came up with for all of his toys. His blue bunny was named Blue Bunny, all right? Just very honest, very descriptive, very straightforward. And probably about 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, I told the kids that they had to clean out their bedroom closets, and they're putting stuff in trash bags. And I almost lost it when I saw Blue Bunny in the trash bag. No, you're not throwing Blue Bunny away. No. Why? Because the bunny has all of these redeeming qualities? Because it smells good? No, I'm pretty sure that's formula over that. I'm like, when was the last time that thing was? Why did I want to keep it? Because I love my son. I love my son. And once upon a time, that stupid, stinky, matted, not even blue anymore bunny was the most important thing to him, and we had to have it overnighted to Kansas City because he was hysterical because he didn't have it. When you love someone, you love the things that are dear to them. John says, by this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commandments. And then he says this in verse 3, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. Am I clicking? Do you hear me clicking on the microphone in my earring? No? Will one of you yell if I start to click? All right, we're close like that. We can yell out in the middle of a video. It's totally fine. Okay, what does it look like? Where are we? Okay, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. It's the mark of love. It's also the mark of obedience. And then he says this is a curious phrase, and his commandments are not burdensome. His commandments are not burdensome. So what does it look like to be a part of God's family? It looks like obeying God's commandments. What are God's commandments? Well, Jesus boiled it down to this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor or your sister or your brother as yourself. And then John says, and his commandments are not burdensome. This is the Greek word baris. Baris means heavy, weighty, burdensome, grievous, oppressive. God's commands are not heavy. They're not grievous. They don't oppress. What is John getting at? Well, we see this word used, and I want to say it's Matthew 23. I didn't jot it down. But Jesus is accusing the Pharisees of loading the Jews down with heavy burdens and things no man can bear, and not lifting even a finger to help them. And so you have the Levitical law, okay, which you find in Leviticus, and you see a retelling of it in the book of Deuteronomy. And then what happened in the time of Jesus' day was that the house of Judah and the house of Israel had been exiled. Israel by the Assyrians, Judah, the southern kingdom, by the Babylonians, and then they were in exile for 70-ish years, and then they were allowed to come back, all right? And the Pharisees were so terrified of breaking the commandments again that they did what's called hedging the Torah. And they built all these laws around the actual law so that when it said, do no work on the Sabbath, what does that mean? Well, it means don't go to the office. Don't make your servants go to the office. Use that time to celebrate the Lord and what he's done in your life. But they had things like, you can move a ladder one step, but not two. You cannot lift up your mat. You cannot it was just ridiculous and nowhere near what God meant. And so that's what John is talking about. These commandments, they're not always easy, but they're not heavy. They're not burdensome. They are very, very doable. How does this work? In Romans chapter 5, how are we supposed to love like this? Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, when you think about it, that it's not heavy, but it's not easy, right? And so what does that look like? Well, Paul, writing a letter to the Christians in Rome in chapter 5, tells us that God's love has been poured out into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he has given to us. In other words, when we abide or remain in God, God pours his love into our hearts. One of the commentators I was studying, his name is Michael Eaton, says, you can only do this by losing yourself in God's love. And I want to just show you an example of what this looks like. I have here a bowl full of God's love. There it is. You were wondering what it looked like. Here it is. This is a bowl full of God's love. This rag is my friend Sandy. She's here. This rag is me. I'm sitting over here. You know what Sandy's doing? She's getting up every single morning and she is studying the Bible and she's immersing herself in God's love. And then you know what happens when she goes around someone else? Oh, look at that. There's love all over the place. We're getting love everywhere. You come and give her a hug and you're going to get all this love on you. Well, what happens when she gets squeezed? Oh my goodness, love comes out. What happens when she gets squeezed harder? More love. Oh my gosh, Sandy, you're so loving. Oh, we need more love. But here's me, and I'm tired, and life has thrown me some curveballs, and I'm grieving, and I'm sad, and I'm frustrated. What happens if you come and try to love on me? Man, that's kind of rough on my skin. What happens when life squeezes me? Nothing. We can only do this when we are immersing ourselves in the love of God. But when you do this, I want you to notice how it just gets everywhere. I mean, it's splashing all around. I've got to be very careful of that speaker. It just gets everywhere. It's messy. It spreads. It's glorious. That is what it looks like to abide in God, to remain in God, to continue in God's love. This love of God is what causes us to love others. 1 John 4:19 says, we love because God first loved us. You know what that means? You don't ever need to tell God you love him. All you ever have to do is say, I love you too. Anytime you have even the slightest inclination to express your love to God, you're only ever answering his initiating love that went before your love. So God pours his love into our hearts. His love causes our heart to respond in love, first toward him, then toward each other. Why are God's commands not burdensome then? Well, they're only burdensome if you're not abiding in his love. You're not going to squeeze much out of this. I don't think it's that humid in here. But when you're abiding in God's love, it's just dripping off you. You can't keep it to yourself. William Barclay says this, I love this. It is the way of God never to lay a commandment on any person without also giving them the strength to carry it out. With the vision comes the power. With the need comes the strength. God does not give us his commandments and then go away and leave us to ourselves. He is there always by our side and within our hearts to enable us to carry out what he has commanded. What is impossible for us becomes possible with God, for with God's help, all things are possible. He's the one that does the heavy lifting. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. For everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Who is it that overcomes the world except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? So John has illustrated to us that we live in a true and greater reality, that there's a whole lot more to see than what we can see. Our physical world overlaps with the spiritual realm, and in this spiritual realm, there are forces at work manifesting in the physical world to destroy God's kingdom work and destroy God's people. But now, John is telling us that we have overcome the world, and the key to our victory is faith. Okay, what does this mean? Let's define some terms. What is the world? The Greek word behind the world is cosmos. It can mean sky, it can mean heavens, it can mean world, it can mean universe, but when John uses it, it means the world apart from God, both the physical world we can see and the spiritual realm that we cannot see. It's everything that seeks to move God's people away from God's will. Temptation, jealousy, anger, bitterness, unforgiveness, rivalry, greed. So how does our faith help us overcome that? Well, let's talk about our faith. What is it that our faith is actually in? Because we do walk around with quite a bit of faith, whether we know it or not. I have all the faith in the world that this stage is going to support me. I have shaky faith that this will not topple over. Enough faith to rest my things on it, but not quite enough faith to lean on it, okay? But what is our faith actually in? Well, John is speaking against the Gnostics, and he's going to keep coming back to the incarnation, to the fact that Jesus really was fully man and fully God. And so we talked about this. I think it was in week 2, but remember, John is the king of loopity-looping. So what does it mean that Jesus came in the flesh? Well, we know from Scripture that Jesus is God. Jesus himself said that he was God. We know that God is love. Jesus is the love of God with skin on. Jesus is God's love come in the flesh, made manifest, made visible to us. And anytime we feel unloved, anytime we feel unworthy, anytime we feel lonely, all we have to do is look at Christ, the physical embodiment of the love of God. God loves you so much that he sent his son, who was perfect in glory, to shed his glory and live in complete humility. I want you to let this play out in your mind. The author of strength learned to walk. The author of wisdom learned to read. He learned his aleph and his bet. The one who said, "Let there be light," learned how to talk. The one who sat outside of time and space willingly confined himself to time and space and a body that gets messy and feels pain, and he lived the perfect life. He fulfilled everything in the Levitical law. And when he climbed on the cross, what did he do? He took the heavy burden of the Levitical law with him. He took the heavy burden of the sin of the world with him. He took the heavy burden of every wrong thought we've ever had, every harsh word we've ever spoken, every lie we've ever told, every ugly thing we've ever done. He absorbed the heavy burden of God's wrath for us so that all that's left for you and for me is love. That's all that's left, because God's wrath has been exhausted. It's been poured out. It's been wrung out on his son so that there is no wrath remaining toward your sin and mine. All that's left is love. All that's left is grace. And God's commandment is not burdensome. Why? Because Jesus took the burden to the cross. And so what happens in us when we really believe that? What happens when we take the red pill and we decide we're going to acknowledge this greater reality? We're victorious. We're victorious. Why? Well, let me ask you this. If you really buy in, if you have shoved all your chips into Jesus and you really believe the gospel, what can this world offer you that you do not already have in Christ? What can this world take from you that you will not get back 100-fold in eternity? This world is passing away. Everything in your purse is tomorrow's landfill trash. This world is not our home. You were built for a new and better world. You have a new and better home. You're going to get a new and better body. So what you see is not all there is to see. And when we believe that, we are victorious. For the Christian, because now we have to define victory. What is victory? What does it look like to be victorious? I think this is where we really get tripped up. How does the world define victory? You walk away with a trophy. You squash all your enemies in the here and now. What does victory look like in the kingdom of God? For the Christian, victory over our circumstances rarely looks like deliverance from our circumstances. I'm going to say that again. For the Christian, victory over our circumstances rarely looks like, sometimes it does, but it rarely looks like deliverance from our circumstances. And that's what we want for the victory, right? But that's not what God promises. There's a story of a village in Africa, and a massive snake got into a hut. And it was a terrifying snake. And so one brave soul went in, chopped off its head, and then ran back out. And for a good measure of time, several minutes, that snake continued to thrash and thrash, and it was so big that it destroyed things, it knocked things over. That's us. The serpent's been beheaded. It just doesn't know it yet. It just doesn't know it yet. So what does that mean? Does that mean that you can have victory in the midst of cancer? Yes, because Jesus has promised to draw near to us through our suffering, and that we will spend eternity, the age to come, in a body that never gets sick. So even if cancer defeats you, it's a very temporary defeat. It's a comma, not an exclamation point. Can you have victory even though you hate your job? Yes, you can. When you are so all in for the gospel, you realize that your job is actually your mission field. And that girl who's so mean, she's just a challenge. She's just a challenge. Can you have victory when your finances are in the toilet? Yes. I hear that through Dave Ramsey, all things are possible. Yes. But if you're in Christ, this life is just a warm-up. This is just the pregame show. This is just the warm-up act. And if you live in this true and better reality where you realize that everything you have is a temporary gift from your Father, and that this world is not your home, and that where you're going is exponentially better than anything you could ever ask for or even imagine, that's victory. This is positional victory. It's positional victory. Paul says in the book of Ephesians that we are seated in the heavenly realms with Christ. And that's weird because I'm sure I'm standing here on a stage with you. But what is he saying? He is saying positionally, because you are in Christ, it is as though you are seated with him in the heavenly realms. We have positional victory now. We will have permanent victory in the age to come. I love this verse. Matthew 19, 28 through 29, Jesus said to them, everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or lands for my name's sake will get it back? No, will receive 100-fold and inherit eternal life. The one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God already has overcome the world. Verse 6, this is he who came by water and blood, Jesus Christ, not by the water only, but by the water and the blood. And the Spirit is the one who testifies, because the Spirit is the truth. For there are three that testify, the Spirit, the water, and the blood, and these three agree. If we receive the testimony of men, the testimony of God is greater. For this is the testimony of God that he has borne concerning his Son. Did anybody else read that and go, what? John is weird. He's just a little bit weird. Okay, so what's going on? Here is my working theory. Irenaeus, an early church father, supports me. Irenaeus was a bishop in the 2nd century who talked about a guy named Cerinthus. Cerinthus was, literally, I'm not exaggerating this, Cerinthus was John's nemesis. And a lot of scholars believe that the entire letter of 1 John is a response to what Cerinthus was teaching. And this is what Cerinthus was teaching. He taught that the divine Christ, the godness of Jesus, descended upon him at his baptism in the form of a dove. Okay, so Jesus was just a kid, then just a teen, and then just a young man, and then all of a sudden he's baptized, and here comes God in the form of a dove and sits on his shoulder, and now he's God. Okay, but then before he was flogged, before he was whipped, before he had to carry his cross up to the hill, before he was crucified, the godness left him. Remember, because you can't like matter is evil, spirit is good, so a spirit would never condescend to death. Okay, so the godness left Jesus before the crucifixion, and only this shell of a person was crucified. So the Gnostics had no problem whatsoever with the water. No problem with the water, representing the water of baptism. They agreed that the Christ, the godness, came by the water, but John says Jesus came by water and blood. Now, John is the only gospel author who includes a curious little fact about Jesus' crucifixion. Now, the way crucifixion worked is typically victims were left to asphyxiate. So when you had their arms nailed this way and their feet nailed, in order to breathe, they had to push up so that their diaphragm could lift enough to take air in, and it was excruciating. That is where the word excruciating comes from, crucifixion, okay? And so because it was the preparation day for the Sabbath, and because the Jews did not want bodies left hanging on crosses on the Sabbath, they told the Roman soldiers to go and break all their legs. There were 3 people being crucified, Jesus and 2 thieves. So they broke the legs of thief number 1, broke the legs of thief number 2, get to Jesus, he's already dead. So one of the soldiers pierces his side with a spear, and out comes water and blood separated, showing that he was dead. Okay, so where are we? Okay, so this is the blood that John is referring to when it says Jesus came by water and by blood. Why does the blood matter? Okay, we get it. Jesus, he was baptized. There's his humanity. That's the witness of the water. Why does the blood matter? Because the cross was the victory. The last enemy to be defeated is death itself, and Jesus defeated death when he rose from the grave on the 3rd day. That's why the death matters. Jesus had to be a man, and he had to die, and he had to rise again, fully God, okay? Now, in the Levitical law, you could not bring a charge against a person with just one witness. So if Christy said something really mean about me, and I wanted to take her she would never do that. And I wanted to drag her to the judge would say, where are your witnesses? And I would be like, me, myself, and I. And he would say, no, you can't do that unless you have at least 2 witnesses. So 2 witnesses, you had a case. 3 witnesses, you had an airtight case. So 3 witnesses was considered an airtight case. So we have 3 witnesses, the water and the Spirit and the blood. How does the Spirit bear witness? Okay, Spirit is the Greek word pneuma, and it's also the word for wind and breath. And I want you to think about the wind for just a second. How do you know that wind exists? If you had to draw a picture of wind, what would you draw? Yeah. Trees blowing, or something bent. We don't see wind, we see wind's effects. So what is the witness of the Spirit? You can't see the Spirit. You can only see the Spirit's effect. So this is the witness of the Spirit, you. Like, we're here 2,000-ish years later, we're still talking about this. People are still coming to know Christ. The global church is still growing. People are still loving and serving others sacrificially. What is the witness of the water? Well, we know from the 1st chapter that John puts a whole lot of time and attention into the fact that he was an eyewitness. And so he is talking about Jesus's baptism. But what's the witness of the water today? Baptism. Baptism is still testifying, because people are still getting baptized. They are still going down in the water to symbolize death with Christ and rising up to represent newness of life. It is the symbol, the fact that baptism is still an ongoing witness. What about the blood? The Jews believed that the life of every living thing was contained in the blood. And so when Jesus shed his blood, he gave his life for ours. And what do? Every Sunday when we gather at church, at least at Rock Point, we break the bread. Yes, communion. We break the bread, which represents his body, and we drink the juice, which represents his blood. It is the ongoing witness of the Lord's Supper. The testimony of God is the witness of the ongoing baptisms that we see, the ongoing work of the Spirit and the Lord's Supper that we take every Sunday. And John says this testimony of 3 witnesses should be way more powerful than any testimony given by a human. Last few verses. Whoever believes in the Son of God has the testimony in himself. Whoever does not believe God has made him a liar, because he has not believed in the testimony that God has borne concerning his Son. And this is the testimony, that God gave us eternal life, and this life is in his Son. Whoever has the Son has life. Whoever does not have the Son of God does not have life. So one last note, and then we'll wrap. There is a difference in believing someone and believing in someone. To believe someone is to accept what they say is true. You're accepting one statement that they said as truth at one particular point in time. To believe in someone is to accept their whole person and all that they stand for. William Barclay says, to believe in Jesus Christ is not simply to accept what he says is true. It is to commit all life into his hands and into his direction, to place ourselves in his hands in time and in eternity. It's to live in the true and greater reality. Right before Morpheus offered Neo the 2 pills, he gave this little explanation of what the Matrix actually is. He says, "It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth." "What truth?" Neo asks. "That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch, a prison for your mind." That is the story of the Bible. From Genesis to Revelation, the Bible tells the same story. We were born into bondage, the bondage of sin, the bondage of self. And we have an enemy who wants to lull us into this false sense of everything's fine and I'll just keep my little corner clean and I'm going to let you live your life. And at the end of the day, hopefully I did enough good things to go to the good place and not the bad place. And that is exactly what the big A Antichrist wants you to believe. Jesus died to set us free from that. He offers us a new birth into the family of God where we will live forever in ever-increasing joy in a world that never wears out and bodies that never get sick. And because of that, when that is the biggest thing in our world, when that is the picture that we allow John to hang on the walls of our mind, when that is the picture that we look at most often, we have victory over all of our circumstances through our faith. So, questions for reflection this week. Where in my life am I living defeated? Behavior betrays belief. Where in my life is my behavior betraying the fact that the picture I'm staring at most frequently is not the true and greater reality of what I have now in Christ? And what is one thing I can do this week apart from Bible study homework, in addition to Bible study homework, that will help me choose the true and better reality in Christ? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the words that you gave John so long ago. God, we thank you that you don't just offer us love, but you are love. You sent your love with skin on. You did everything there was to do to secure our eternity with you. And God, it is so hard to live in the reality of your love. And so we're just asking that you would continuously put this back in front of us, Father, that the greatest truth in our lives is that we are more loved than we could ever imagine, and that you have freed us up to give generously, serve sacrificially, love lavishly. Because when we soak ourselves in this truth, when we soak ourselves regularly in your love, your command is not burdensome, it's joyful. And so help us live in that joy, Father. Lord, I pray that our discussion this evening would be fruitful and that it would bless each other and you. And we pray these things in the beautiful, mighty name of Jesus Christ and by the power of your Holy Spirit. Amen.